Hello, this is Professor Hazara, and as promised, I'm making a series of recordings on the weighted average cost of capital. This first series is just going to be an introduction, and then we'll apply it to I'll do it on Microsoft, you'll apply it to Apple, and then we'll see if we can update it, like come up, insert a weighted average cost of capital along with other adjustments that we'll be making to these worksheets. And we'll be using Microsoft as the example and Apple as the homework that you're doing. Anyway, so here's the question we're asking. So these sets of videos are going to deal with what happens, how do you deal with leverage when a company has long-term debt. Okay, and in this first video, hopefully it's only going to be about 10 minutes long, I'm just going to very quickly talk about the concepts. Okay, now the traditional concepts in the benefit of holding long-term debt in a capital structure. The traditional concept was written by Diglion and Miller, and it was in the 1950s. And I think these gentlemen won a Nobel Prize for this. But here's the idea. Here's the concept. Basically, they took the position, and it's the position I've always agreed with, that what matters in determining a company's value are two things. Number one, the assets that a company has, and the quality of the management. To me, that's at least 90% of it. You can finance them with common stock. You can finance them with all debt. You can finance them with a combination of common stock and long-term debt. But ultimately, it's the assets and how they're managed is what counts. And that was the point. Okay, and so here's basically what they said. Let's say you have two companies here. You have company A and you have company B. And let's say these are twin companies. The companies have the exact same level of assets, okay, and let's almost assume they're the exact same assets, and let's assume that the managers of company B are identical twins of the manager of company A. Everything is exactly the same. The only difference between company A and company B is how they're financed. Company A, who has one set of assets, one set of managers, and company B, which has the identical set of assets, the identical set of managers. The only difference is company A is financed all through common stock, and company B is financed 60% common long-term debt and 40% common stock. Now, what Diglion and Miller said was that basically both companies should have the same. Both companies should have the same value, period. That it doesn't matter if the assets are the same and the management is the same, then they should have the same value. It doesn't matter. This is their initial version. Then it doesn't matter how whether they're financed all stock, all debt, or a mixture of stock and debt. Okay, now shortly after they came out with this theory, okay, and I have sets of notes which get into more detail on this, but we'll deal with it this way. After they came out with this theory, they kind of came out with a modified version of the theory because they realized, like we all do, that interest is tax deductible. And since interest is tax deductible and dividends are not, that will give companies with long-term debt in their capital structure a little bit of an advantage because they get the tax shield advantage. They can deduct interest, they save money on the taxes, which is a cash inflow. Okay, so, and that's what we'll be dealing with. We'll be dealing with what we call the modified Modigliani-Miller theory. So first, their first theory was that that if two firms have the same assets and management, that the financing in the mix is irrelevant, and that assets are what count. Okay? It doesn't matter whether you're 100% common stock or 100% long-term debt in common stock, or 100% long-term debt, or a mixture in between somewhere. That ultimately, if a companies are the same and they have the same management, they should be valued the same. But then they modify the theory to recognize that interest is tax deductible. So what we'll be dealing with here is sort of the modified version of the M&M theory, it's called, and we'll be believing what we'll be doing is basically valuing debt based on the tax deductibility of the interest. That's what we'll be doing in the next videos. The final thing I want you to do here is I just want to very quickly look at the terminal value, because we're going to be dealing with terminal value formula initially, and then we're going to add growth. That's why I'm going to do this. Is we'll be dealing with the terminal value formula. We're going to incorporate interest into it, and then we'll add growth after that. So I just wanted to introduce you to two concepts, one which you already know. This is the formula that we've been using for terminal values. It's the constant growth formula, where a company grows really fast, and then after a certain period of time, its growth slows down, the product mature, there's competition, and so its growth rate slows down, and it begins to grow at about the rate of the economy. That's the constant growth formula. There's another version of, and they're mathematically very easy to derive, but there's another version, and basically it's the no growth formula. So instead of assuming that a company grows slowly, this formula assumes that a company just stays flat, that the company doesn't grow. Okay? And so this formula is very easy. It's just a cash flow. Any cash flow. It could be a dividend that doesn't grow. It could be an interest rate, a fixed interest cash flow that doesn't grow. It could be a free cash flow that doesn't grow. It just stays flat over time, and that's divided by some obviously low cost of capital. Okay, so we're going to be actually using this formula here to do the valuation of companies, and we'll be using two different ways of valuing the company, and then we're going to add growth to it. That's why I like doing it this way, because it kind of corresponds with the idea that first you value the assets, and then you consider adding long-term debt and seeing how much value that the tax deductibility of interest adds. Okay, so those are the concepts. To repeat, first concept is, according to Diglion and Miller, if two firms have identical assets and managers, their value should be the same. That was the original theory, except they modified the theory to consider now that interest is tax deductible, so holding long-term debt has some value, and that's what the theory we'll be working on. And then finally, this is sort of separate. The mechanics of what we'll be using is we'll be using a no-growth formula to value a firm. We're going to value it one way. Firms with leverage, we'll value it one way. We'll value it the other. We'll match those two to make sure everything's kosher, and then okay. And then we will add growth to it. Okay, we'll start with a very basic valuation, short-term form valuation. This week we'll probably do it in a fancier way after that. But anyway, so this is what we'll be doing, and basically we're just going to come up with a different cost of capital that includes the value of debt, and then we'll be subtracting out the debt in the end. Okay, so anyway, so I'll put this video up, and we'll start with the next videos coming in. Thank you.